Joe, as part of your as part of your work, I understand you've been getting into this book called Beyond Dreaming. Can you go into what that is?
Yeah. So it's called Beyond Dreaming, a guide to awakening consciousness through the path of astral projection and out of body experiences. Discover dimensions beyond the physical.
When was it written?
It was written during the pandemic. So it's like a brand new book.
So it's new. Okay.
It's by Gene Hart. It's his first book. And I've had brief contact with him online. So hopefully I can get him on as a guest. We can interview him about this topic. But dude, you have to read this book. It's awesome. Um, I must say, like, I could see a lot of people being skeptical about astral projection, thinking it might not be real, but it is. So it's something to take seriously and really try to think about, adding to your spiritual work. I've never astral projected, but this book also it goes deep into lucid dreaming, which is something I do have experience doing, and so I'm gonna try to work towards this astral projection.
Yeah, as you say, work toward this astral projection. As I understand it, astral projection is like a step up from meditation and like maybe even a step above what's understood as lucid dreaming. So is there like a hierarchy here of like states?
Kind of, but not really, but the way he puts it in the book is, like, there's a general order to it, like, you start with meditation, and then generally you could lead that to lucid dreaming, and the next level you'd go to would be astral projecting or out of body experiences where you literally leave your body in, like, your dreamlike states. But yeah, it's a good book because he doesn't tell you, like, a step-by-step method, like, "Oh, lay down, do this, do that, and then you'll astral project," or, like, a quick method to get there. It's more about just awakening consciousness in general and how, as a result, you can have these experiences. And, I think it's a phenomenal book, and I you need to read it for sure, and I recommend it to anybody listening. It's awesome.
So, in what ways does he get into the relationship between astral projection and just consciousness as a whole?
Well, see, the thing is, the more aware you become, the more spiritual work you do in your, like, physical waking life, it comes with you into your dreams and your sleep life. So, like, in the non-physical, as he calls it. So, like, people if you have a lot of, like, nightmares and reoccurring dreams, it's it's often linked to maybe a lower end level of consciousness. The more aware you become, the more vivid your dreams become, and then that leads to having control in your dreams, and then from there, you can kinda elevate to the astral level, which like, the astral plane, as they call it, would be just kind of higher and lower levels of dimensions that you can travel to in non-physical states.
So, in terms of lucid dreaming, the only experience that I have with it is, and I think a lot of people can sort of relate, like they've had this happen to them before, where you're in a dream and you realize that you're having a dream. But as I understand, there's a difference between understanding that you're in a dream where it's still kind of on rails and you're not in control, like you're still being guided by the events of the dream, whatever they may be. But then there's a point in time where you can take control of the dream, and that's where it becomes lucid. So, does the book go into any ways in which you can break free of that on rails feeling and use that as like a catapult to get into a lucid type of dream?
Yeah, kind of. See, there's not like it's not as rigid as like non-lucid, lucid, astral. Like it's kind of a flowing state. Like there's a mixture. You could be in a dream and be like somewhat lucid, but again, it all links to your awareness. And one thing that you can do, what he goes into in the book, is reality checks during your waking state and your physical state. Like right now in your life, you could do what they call like a reality check and do something. Like, for instance, a good one he says is hold your nose and try to breathe, and if you can't breathe through your nose while holding it, clearly in your physical state, you're waking. But if you can breathe through your nose with it while you're covering it, then you're in a dream.
So, you can you explain that concept a little further, like just the concept of um, having a way of acknowledging like whether you're in a dream or not.
So so in your physical state, you wanna develop a habit of doing these reality checks. So it's like a subconscious thing you do. So like I said, holding your nose and breathing. You want to do that multiple times throughout the day and genuinely look around and question, is this a dream? Even when it seems obvious. Because while you're dreaming, it doesn't seem obvious. Everything is it seems completely normal. You could be talking to a camel and it'll seem normal. Like the strangest things will seem normal in a dream. So what you wanna do is train your subconscious to do these reality checks, and the more you do that, you're more likely to do it in your dream state, and then you'll be questioning your dreams more, so you can become lucid in the dream.
It sounds like the inception concept of like the top.
Yeah, exactly, yep.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I often hear as well people will get into a lucid dream and they'll realize that they've become lucid and they get excited and sort of pop themselves out of it. Is
Yeah.
that a problem that you've had before? And is that something that you have to get past in order to ascend to like an astral projection type of level?
Yeah, definitely, like, my first few lucid dreams, I would be so excited that, you'll wake up, you're flying around, your heart rate starts jolting, and then you move and you wake up. That's why they say, like, meditation is key. You have to know how to calm yourself down and become aware of what's going on and be fully conscious of what's happening. And then you can keep yourself relaxed and explore deeper in each state. So, like, some people will even, when they become lucid in a dream, you could actually sit down and meditate for a little bit, like meditate in your dream to calm yourself, and then you can push yourself further. But yeah, it's crazy the stuff that, the stories I've heard. I haven't astral projected yet, but this morning I started doing some of the techniques in the book and I got close, but I bitched out a little bit. I got scared and started moving. But it's seems like if you're not trying to do psychedelics, this is the next logical step that you can explore, like, spiritually and, work with something that seems out of this world, but is completely natural to you and everybody can do it. Like in the book, he calls it a birthright. So every human being can do this and it just takes practice. But thing is, you're not gonna get it in one go. You have to really work on yourself. You have to do the consciousness work. That's the thing. You have to really study this stuff and really implement it into every part of your life, and then it'll start you'll notice it showing up in your life, just your general state of mind, how you look at things, how you behave, but thing is, all that stuff transcends into your sleep. So, like, when you're dreaming, your waking life, definitely, it has everything to do with what happens when you sleep. Every night when you go to sleep, you do have an out of body experience. You're just not aware of it or you don't recall it. So, like, another important thing he said is, remembering your dreams. So, like, when you wake up, don't move your body. You wanna if you just had a dream, you wanna stay completely still and recall your dream. If as soon as you start moving, the dream starts to fade. So if you stay completely still after you wake up, you can easier, like, remember the details of your dream. And then you wanna have a piece of paper next to your bed or maybe, like, just your phone to voice record, and then, write down your dream or record it.
I've noticed multiple times you've said that moving your body takes you out of it. Like earlier you said this morning when you bitched out, you said it's because you moved. And you just said now that um you have to stay completely still when you wake up. So I find it interesting that there is such a connection to the movement of your body and the inability to get to these places. It sort of reminds me of meditation in a way too. Um, so yeah, how do you see those two things relating?
Well, yeah, because you have to get into, like, that deep meditative state, and you have to get to that state where you transcend your body and mind, and, like, that's where this meditation comes in so deeply into this subject and just spiritual work in general. So, like, through meditation, you'll learn that you aren't your mind or your body. You're not either of those things. through meditation, what you're gonna you end up discovering the whole point, in my opinion, of meditation is to discover what you truly are, like discover the true self. So what you end up discovering is that you aren't your mind and you're not your body. You are that which observes your mind and body. So you have to understand that all that stuff you're thinking in your meditation, that isn't you. You have to make a connection to that which is observing all of that. So when you get in these meditative states, you remain still. Like you have to be completely still so you can really get there. Because if you're moving your body and your thoughts are racing, it's natural for you to cling onto them and then identify with them. So that's why, like, when you're hitting these, I don't know, these states of like where you're ready to astral project or become lucid, you have to remain completely still so you can really identify with that true self. It's completely a spiritual practice. I mean, a lot of people will have lucid dreams and some people will even astral project like by accident. But the thing is you could actually learn it and make it a method and a part of your life. So like you think you sleep every night and for a lot of people that's wasted time. But you have to understand how important your sleeping state is and the things you can do and explore while you sleep. It's incredible. I mean, like I said, I haven't astral projected yet. I almost did, but I've had plenty of lucid dreams, and this is even before I've started, like, going really deep into this work. So now I'm really ramping it up, and I'm gonna try to do this stuff, like, every night and really try to do the work. Because before when I would, have lucid dreams, I'd just kinda go crazy and do wild shit, like, because you become basically a god, you could do whatever you like. You could fly around and, like, but now I realize you can talk to the people in your dreams, maybe you can get information, you can do some work in there. So that's what I'm gonna try to do from now on.
Like take it to a deeper place.
Yeah, make use it, like, use it and really explore the depths of it rather than in that surface level kinda stuff. Because like, at first, you're gonna be completely overwhelmed, and that's why, like, you gotta breathe and make sure you don't become too excited and you'll wake up. So, yeah, you have to kind of remain calm or else like, because I mean, one of the first times I became lucid, I was running, like, so fast and jumping, like, miles and flying, and it feels so real. I mean, it is real. It's as real as this, it's just not physical. So, like, there's no you're not bound by all these laws that we have right now. So, like, you can do this stuff and you experience it, like, at a deep level. Like, flying is insane. Like, you could feel it in your stomach, like, when you're in a roller coaster or something, but you have ultimate control. So you have to what I'm gonna try to do is kind of go past that and maybe try to explore deeper areas rather than just surface level pleasures. Like you one thing you have to control is your sexual desires. Don't go grabbing tits and doing crazy shit like that, because they say that that'll get you excited and kick you right out. Like if you start going crazy and trying to, fulfill your sexual desires, which you probably will. But you gotta that's one thing I've noticed you have to push past that desire and really do the work instead of just going after your regular material pleasures and impulses. You gotta work past impulses. That's a huge thing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. In order for you to go deeper, you'd have to get rid of that surface level veil type of stuff.
Yeah, well, before I was doing spiritual work, that was, like, the fun of it. I mean, it's just all your impulses can be fulfilled, but the thing is, it shortens the dream, like, you'll wake up sooner, like, if that's why I think it's gonna be good. I'd never tried it yet, but next time I have a lucid dream, I'm gonna sit down and meditate. Some people say, like, you can go, from a lucid dream to the astral plane, like, some people I've read there's a lot of different methods. Like, you could just fly into the air and with your will and intent, like, just break through to the astral. Some people I've heard that they'll create a portal, like a physical portal and jump through, like because when you're lucid, you can do all this crazy stuff. It's like everything is in your control. So, like, I've heard different methods, but, I wanna try next time I become lucid in a dream, I wanna sit down and really, like, just meditate and see what I can do. So, that's what my next goal is. I mean, I'm telling you, dude, this is for everybody listening too. This, especially if you're not looking to use psychedelics, if for some reason that's not in your wheelhouse, this is seems to be. the next logical progression to push yourself further. Like, if you see yourself at a standstill with your spiritual work, then this is something where you can go further and experience something maybe similar to a psychedelic, but even if depending who you ask, more profound.
Yeah, you said that it's a method. There are many methods to get to these places, but I think that the first stage of any of these methods seems to be meditation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's everything. It's just how it's the key to spiritual work, really. I mean, like I said, in this book, he actually stresses like a method of no method, basically. Because like you can find a lot of books on this stuff that'll give you like very rigid scientific looks at this and like how to activate your brain in the right way. He doesn't really go in that direction, which I like. Like it's perfect the way he puts it. It's really just about doing the consciousness work and becoming more aware in your everyday life in the physical world, and then that comes with you. You bring it into your sleep at night. So your dreams will naturally start to become more vivid. And if you're doing the reality checks and keeping a dream journal, all this stuff is going to play into just naturally when you fall asleep at night. Then on top of it, he does have like meditation methods you could use before sleep in order to, really push yourself to go to the astral. But he really stresses just the work that we've been talking about and just, striving for truth. And if you do that in your everyday life, it will transcend into your dreams.
I like that. I'm not sure if he calls it this or if you're calling it this consciousness work. I like that phrasing because that can mean almost anything. Because when you say spiritual work, and I do say that spiritual work, spiritual practice, like there's a connotation that comes with it that I think turns some people off because it's associated with
New age.
religion, with new age, with God, with fairy tale, hippy dippy type shit.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's very unfortunate because the word spiritual I think is perfect for what it's actually describing, but because it's been like sort of hijacked, it's troubling sometimes for some people to hear. And it's funny, consciousness is becoming that type of a word as well. You hear consciousness, you know, thrown around a lot in spaces that it might not belong. Um, but I do like the phrase consciousness work because it broadens the scope of what you can do to get you there.
Yeah, that's what I like to use that term. I align that with truth. Like consciousness, see, if you ask me, it's everything. We talked about this a little bit. And I wanted to actually touch on this is like I was thinking about we were talking about how consciousness isn't something that you have, it's just something that is. And it made me think about like ownership in general. Like ownership, what I was thinking is we just assume that ownership is like a natural property of the universe. But like what makes you think that? So like if you think of the example of let's say you buy a kid a toy. So you get this toy for the kid and you give it to the kid. And then after a certain amount of time, the kid plays with the toy, becomes attached to the toy, and it becomes his toy. The kid will say, "Oh, this is my toy." But that's an illusion. The toy, nothing actually changed about the toy. The toy is the same as it was when it was on the shelf. So there's no actual ownership as like a property of the universe. This is my body. That's all an illusion. So the same thing can be applied to consciousness. You're attached to it. So you say like, yeah, my consciousness. We all have our own separate consciousness. But really that ownership isn't a true property of the universe. That's a projection that we put on top of things.
Yeah, it's like it's an emotional projection of the evolution of our survival mind because it seems to me that the whole concept of ownership is is not something that we had when we were in like an animal state. Like this sort of brings us back to the stoned ape theory or the stoned ape hypothesis. And at the time, before, if you guys didn't listen to episode 2, you should. It's pretty solid. It's all about the stoned ape theory and the mysteries of Eleusis. But if you track back to the human form at that time, it seems that there was less of an emphasis on ownership and like a dominator type of a culture and more of a nomadic symbiotic culture. And with the introduction of farming and becoming less nomadic, that's when we start to segregate our land. It's when we start to say this is yours and that's mine. And that extrapolated all the way to 2022, and some kid gets a tablet, you know and this is his tablet where he has his apps, and if he logs into his account, he can view his related video, you know what I mean? And it's just it keeps ramping up
Yeah.
this ownership concept.
And it's so embedded in our everyday lives that we take it as something real and absolute when really it's not. Like, and that's the thing with, with meditation that helps you is like you get to these states where you completely relax your mind and you disassociate with everything that you take as truth in your day-to-day life. But you have to start to realize that all this stuff is just projections of the ego mind. So you have to really become aware of that stuff. And that's the thing that, and like, go back to this book, all this work, when you go to sleep, the work doesn't end. Like that, you can do so much amazing stuff when you go to sleep and do the work in your dreams. And really, like, I mean, I haven't astral projected yet, but I hear stories of people talking to past relatives, like, or doing like stuff that just seems so absolutely impossible. And if you would have told me this a couple years ago, I would have said it sounds ridiculous and impossible. But once you start to lucid dream and get to these meditative states, you can really understand that it is possible. Like he has a whole part in this book where he talks about like he doesn't spend too much time on it because he's assuming that most people that buy this book are already open to the possibility, but he does spend a little bit of time talking about, suspending disbelief. Like you have to be extremely open-minded to do any of this work because we're so indoctrinated into a physical, materialist, scientific mode of thinking. We think that everything has to have a method or a system. It's like we're so indoctrinated into one mode of thinking. So meditation will help break you out of that. You gotta really do the contemplation and introspection work and really kinda just pull apart everything that you take as a belief. So that's why, like, epistemology, I'm huge on epistemology, like, doing like, research epistemology and philosophy and those things to really start to open your mind, and you can start to understand why you have your beliefs and that you can really understand that that's all they are is beliefs. Because, yeah, we all our beliefs we take as truth. I mean, this happens for everybody. It's not like I'm on a high horse saying that. I'm saying I've been that way my whole life, but I'm now starting to realize that I've been wrong about a lot of stuff.
And it's important to identify that, like, you're still there and I'm still there. Like, we haven't gone anywhere. It's almost like we talked about, I'm not sure if it was the last podcast we did, but we talked about, um no, this was in the Ross Barger quiz where the question or the statement was something along the lines of like, does your past, or like, are you an amalgamation of your past choices?
Right.
And yes, you are, and yes, we all are, and we are all still the people that we were. But that's why nobody should ever ascend themselves to a high horse, because we're all human and we all still are the things that we've always been, and we still have all the neuroses that we've ever had. um Ramdas talks about, through his spiritual work, he said his neuroses, he has not shed himself of a single one of them, and he's quite a neurotic person, as he would describe. But his neuroses used to be gigantic mountains, and they ruled over his consciousness and his reality. And now they're just little tiny hills that he can just step right over, because when you're able to quiet the chatter, when you do that consciousness work, the spiritual work that we're talking about, you can quiet the chatter, and you can choose to realign your priorities in a way where you're running your reality and you're not letting your neuroses run you.
Yeah, it's like, saying like, "Oh, I'm enlightened," or "I'm awakened." It's like saying I'm humble, you know?
You know, some days, like
You feel
today,
that way.
it was like 73 degrees or something in March, which is, unfathomable in Pennsylvania. And I'm driving, I'm on the highway and it's sunny and I got this great music playing. The windows are down, the dog is in the back. And I'm thinking, man, like I feel enlightened. You know what I mean? Like some
Yeah,
days you feel like God is in the passenger seat of your mind and you guys are just cruising, you know? And those are great days.
that's a sweet spot, yeah.
It's a sweet spot. And in order to have days like that, you got to do this work. But not all days are going to be like that. You're never going to be enlightened 100% of the time, but sometimes you will reach that, like those levels.
Yeah, it's infinite, so you're never done, that's the beauty of it.
And you're constantly in and out, in and out, in and out.
Mhm. Yeah, it's endless, but yeah, for me, one of the biggest moments for me, when I realized the concept of, like, the infinite now, like, the eternal now, that really changed me, like, to be able to really experience the present and realize that time isn't like, your past, the future, those aren't real, it's like, to really and that's what meditation and honestly DMT got me to understand that. The eternal now, like, eternity is now, it's not a later time, and then you could really it frees you of all that shit in your brain, the negative talk or whatever goes on in your head, all your problems. If you I forget who said this, it's famous, but they say that, like, 99% of your suffering takes place in your head, like, you're not a lot of times when you're suffering, if you ground yourself in reality and look around, like, everything's okay. It's all stuff that you're imagining. It's imagined suffering. So it's it's a freeing thought when you start to realize some of this stuff. It's incredible. Like, I never thought, a couple years ago, no, not even 2 years ago, if you woulda tried to tell me any of this stuff, I would have laughed it off and said, "You're crazy, this and that," and I would have just started drinking some beers and just going along with my bullshit. But it's really insane that you can dig yourself up out of all the bad places you put yourself in. It's usually just that. It's usually yourself putting yourself in those spots. So it's incredible to know that you're more than human, you're a lot more than your ego, and you can transcend all that and understand yourself on a deep level and have a connection with something divine. Like, it's there for everybody. And it's like you can understand yourself on a level that you can realize that you aren't just a biological life form. It's really hard to do this stuff though because we're so deeply embedded in our belief systems and our ideologies. Like, we're taught for 12 years. We're like it's literally true. We're indoctrinated into science, into thinking in a scientific, orderly way, which science is great, but the one thing it isn't is it's not truth. See, science works off of like a pragmatism, like pragmatic ideology. Like, if something works, it's true. That's kind of what science says, but pragmatism isn't truth. That's the thing. It doesn't truth doesn't have to be provable, and if something works doesn't make it true. Like, religion works for some people, it works for a lot of people, but not to say like, oh, religion is or isn't true, but it's just like a contrast. Like, scientific people will point to religion and say like it's complete nonsense. But if you're working from a pragmatist, like a pragmatic frame of mind, saying if something works, it's true, then religion would be true. You know what I mean?
It's really all about the nuance of language that you use. And it's just like the word God. The word truth doesn't mean one thing. And people get into arguments with each other because when they say or describe what they feel truth is, they're not identifying with the other person that their definitions match and they're both talking about the same thing because you can talk about truth in a form that 2 plus 2 equals 4 and there are a certain number of neurons in the brain and like there's a certain number of planets in our solar system and there are things that you can rightfully identify as truth using science but you're not going to be able to quantify like the entire circle that is around all that is truth, because truth has many different meanings. If you go and look at the famous conversations now between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, they're essentially arguing the entire time about what the definition of truth is. One is saying this is the definition of truth, and one is saying no, this is. But I think that both of them could have done everyone a service in agreeing that both of the things that they were describing are different forms of truth. And Jordan Peterson was talking about more of a religious form of truth, where if you say believe in a God that isn't physically provable or physically real, as Sam Harris would say,
Yeah.
but it still leads to positive progress in some way, and it will lead you to, we'll say, a better outcome than believing in something that is, we'll say, physically true, then that itself is in a way a truth, because their end result is what the point of the truth is. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you mean. Yeah. I get they just came out with another discussion a couple days ago, I think. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, he
But
just released it. I heard him talking about it, where he said that this one was way better because he blamed himself for the conversation going awry, because he wanted to sort of prove he was right in saying that his version of truth was what truth is. But he said, I heard him talking about this on an interview he did. It may have actually been with Kurt Jaimungal, where he said that instead, this time, he decided to just ask Sam questions and sort of flesh out where he was coming from, so that they could have a more nuanced discussion as opposed to a debate.
yeah, well, and that's the problem with debate and even just logic in general. Like when you realize that reality is infinity, and there's infinite subsets of infinity. So like the thing is with logic or debate even is it will go on forever. Like literally it will never end. Like that's why in a conversation like that with Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, they went for like what 3 hours, some crazy amount of time, and they couldn't even agree on just the first basic point, which what is truth. And the thing was like truth, it transcends logic. It's prior to logic. Logic is just a tool that we use. That's another thing. We're indoctrinated into prioritizing certain modes of thinking over others. So, like, we're very left brained and we prioritize the physical way over the non physical. Like, we're talking about lucid dreaming and out of body experiences, astral projection, and stuff. Like, in the book, Gene Hart, he says that this should be taught to us, like, as children in schools. Like, we could be so more spiritually advanced if this stuff was taught to us, but instead, if you bring this up to, 90% of the population, they won't even believe it's real. They'll think it's untrue. But, yeah, this it's the logic has its limits, but at the same time, it's infinite. So you could logically get to truth, or you could logically just spin yourself in circles too. You just gotta understand that all this stuff that you put on such a high pedestal is often very limited. And if you tell somebody that the real truth and the answers to the universe and all these existential questions that we all ask ourselves, that the way that you get them isn't by science or asking other people, it's actually by searching within. People will hear that and say, "That's impossible. I'm not smart enough to do that." But it's not about smart. We're just so left brained and intellectual and thinking in ways of methods and order and progress and production. Like we're so focused on those aspects that we don't even believe that truth can be found within. Like religion has been bastardized and probably, well, I'd say definitely mistranslated and misinterpreted. So we look at all these things and we don't see any value in them. But the truth is, what people have to realize is that all these big answers are actually found within. You're never going to find them from other people. You can read about them in a book that'll guide you and point you in the right direction, but the truth is you have to get there yourself, and you are fully 100% capable of knowing the unknown things. I mean, you are it. You're infinite just like everything around you. So you can do a lot more than we were taught, or a lot more than we believe that we're capable of.
The problem might even come in the form of our inability to accept questions as answers to our questions. Because in our society and the way that we're taught, and this goes to the scientific point that you said before, it seems that unless we have a concrete answer for a question, then we consider the question irrelevant, which is why a lot of science is very specialized and like individualized. They compartmentalize science quite a bit. So it seems that that science doesn't have a cohesive, connected theory for or even idea of how all of these things intertwine with one another and what they mean to each other. Because if there is anything that I've ever learned from just observing the world and what we're talking about as like consciousness work and stuff, it's that everything is so intricately connected and it's all so perfect that if we're going to try to identify, you know, what say an ant does as it forms its colony and the way that it revolves its life around its queen, or the way the bees do the same thing, or the way certain animals act in their mannerisms, if we're going to look at all of those things, then I feel like it's important to connect them to a why. And science doesn't ask why, and it doesn't ask how do these things connect to each other? How do they make each other up? And what's their relationship to one another?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And one of the things I like that you said is that you brought up the fact how many like different sciences there are. And see, like to get to this, do this spiritual work, this consciousness work, and understand the absolute truth in this, like it requires a more holistic way of thinking. And the thing is with science, it's going to infinitely divide into, specific categories. There's neuroscience, biology, chemistry, like there's, you know, 1,000 years ago, all those didn't exist. It's going to continue infinitely dividing. It's the opposite of a holistic way of thinking. So, like, if you ask, a neurologist about the truth, he's going to be like, "Oh, well, that's philosophy. That's for you to do in your armchair. I just focus on this." And you can ask specialized scientists all these things, and when it comes to the why, they usually take it like it's not worth answering because they're so specified in one mode of science or one way of thinking. There's no collective, and they look at the why as maybe not pragmatic, therefore not, if it's not useful, then it's not in their prerogative to answer.
Another problem I think along the same lines is when if you would ask, say, a neuroscientist, or even if you ask a spiritual person, like you ask a bunch of different people in a bunch of different specialties, what do you do to save the world? Somebody who takes mushrooms is going to say everybody's got to take mushrooms. Somebody who works on neuroscience says everyone's got to have their neurons in this exact way. If somebody who's working in psychology would say, oh, everyone has to go through behavioral cognitive psychology, and they have to identify their parts and do parts work and all these things, because our tendency as individuals is when we have a hammer, every problem is a nail. Yeah, I'm
Exactly.
sure you've heard that before, but there's another quote that you may have heard before. The map is not the territory. These are methods. And to me, the consciousness work is like the glue that fits all of these other things together. And they just like science needs the consciousness work to fulfill its destiny of describing reality, I think that the consciousness work also needs science. I think these things both work hand in hand together, and the quicker that people start to understand that what's important is not each individual thing, but how they relate and how you can make one emergent thing better than the sum of its two parts, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, you said the quote, "The map is not the territory." There's another quote I heard, forget who said it, but it goes along those same lines. It says, I might be, it might not be it 100%, but it was basically, the better the method, the bigger the problem, or like, in the way you just said, like it'd be like the better the map, the bigger the problem, because basically what that's saying is like if the map gets so good that, like, it's so perfect, you'll never actually have like, if it's a map of, like, the woods, and the map is so good that you never actually have to go into the woods. So, like, the same is happening with these methods, like, the map, it will never be the territory. So, you see what I mean? The better the method, the bigger the problem. And see, that's a thing a lot of people don't realize, or maybe they just wholeheartedly disagree with, but it's very true. It's whatever symbol you place on top of something, method that you use, it's never going to be the actual thing. It's just the human way to understand it. And a lot of times they're not even, true.
And as Ram Dass said, a worthy method will self-destruct. And in that way, you will not get caught in the method, because the method is just a method. Again, the map is not the territory. If you're caught in the map, then you're never going to actually tread the terrain. If you're looking at a map and you're deciding whether or not you want to go on this crazy hike, and you're visually picturing yourself in this map while you're looking at it, and you're like, man, this is a pretty steep incline. It says on the map that it's this high and it's this long, and it seems pretty, I don't know, you can you can get too attached to the map and too attached to the idea.
100%. It's kind of along the lines of what we're talking about. But have you ever heard of the the concept of a holon?
A holon.
A holon.
Is that spelled like WHOL, like
No,
whole, or
uh, HOLON.
I've never heard
So
of
it's
this.
like kind of attached to holistic thinking. Um, but basically, like, this kind of goes along with what we were saying. Like, if you ask a physical scientist, a materialist scientist, like, what is reality? What is it made of? They'll say, it's made of atoms or particles or planks or whatever. And then you ask the string theorist, what is it made of? They'll say strings. The mathematician might find a way to say it's made of numbers, whatever. So, like, a holistic I forget I see, I didn't come prepared for this, but, I forget who the guy is who came up um, with this concept, but I'm gonna read the definition of a holon for you quick. Okay. And the what this is, uh, what I theorized what is reality made of? Some people would say it's made of holons. A holon is an unidentifiable part of one or more systems and is, at the same time, a system formed by subordinate parts that integrates it as a whole. So, what a holon means, it's a perspective, like a perspectival way of looking at reality and what it's made of. So, basically, it's saying that reality is made of wholes and parts. So, like, and it's an infinite fractal kind of. So, like, everything is made out of a whole that is comprised of parts. So, like, you could go down like, for instance, a human is made out of organs, and then the organ is made out of a smaller system. Like, it's basically just systems all the way down and all the way out, which I think it's a different way. It's not looking at it like a materialist would. You're looking at reality as it actually is built out of systems inside systems, like parts inside of holes where the part is also a whole, and it goes fractally down. And, like, you could look around your room. This is something I started doing, and start finding all the holons in your room. Like, you could look at, like, a car or whatever if you're outside and say, like, okay, a car is made out of each part, and then you look at each part and see what they're made of, and it goes down forever. Same, it goes out forever. So that's just the concept of a hole on. I wasn't sure if you ever heard that, but I just wanted to bring it up because it's kind of interesting. It's a different way. It's not like looking for a material to grab. It's more perspectival of a way to look at what reality is made of. So instead of saying it's made of atoms, it's actually just saying, like, it's made out of holes that are built of parts, that the parts are also built of holes.
It seems like an undeniable thing,
Yeah, I mean, I'm
because if
kind
you
of
just look at reality, it is just a bunch of systems that complexify themselves and go out and in.
yeah, and there's a lot more to it. Like, people can explain it way better than I do, and there's books about this stuff too. I didn't come prepared with the resources, but is if people are interested in looking at, like, a new way to see what reality is made of, that's something you could look into. Maybe we'll talk about it deeper on another episode, but I thought it was just something I could bring up.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just reading something about, like you see all the time, people talk about how the atoms make up at like all of reality, and it's like the smallest particle that we can identify. Um, and inside the atom, there is nothing. So does that mean that everything is made of nothing? And I don't know. I think that's a really cool like thought experiment. It brings me to like it brings me to like the concept of the yin and the yang a little
Mhm.
bit. How you can't have everything without nothing. You can't have nothing without everything. So of course they're intertwined and dependent on one another.
Well, that's the thing, it's if you, like, ask me that what everything is made of is consciousness, and what consciousness is nothing.
But see, can you say a statement like everything is made of consciousness without knowing what consciousness actually is?
Well, if you don't know what consciousness is, but what I'm saying is consciousness is nothing in the sense that a lot of people will hear that and say, like, "Oh, it doesn't mean anything," but when I say nothing, a lot of people will think that means non-existence, but it exists. So the way that most people think of nothing, they think that nothing is there, like, it's just the language, but it's a nothing that exists. It's not non-existence. So, like I mentioned in a previous episode, I kinda didn't go into detail about it, like, you think of, um, like, consciousness as infinite clay with no qualities. It's it can be formed and shaped infinite ways into everything. And that's what I would say everything is made of is consciousness. So it's like but at its core, it is actually nothing. It's the voidless void, the groundless ground. It's like it's the same thing. That's why like a good way to look at it is like when you're dreaming, you think that when you're dreaming everything is made out of atoms or is it an imagination? Like what is it? So you could bring that into life. I think a good exercise that I like to do also, speaking of dreaming again, is look at your waking state as a dream as well. Because I think we should do a whole episode on this, but I mean, essentially, in my opinion, and I think this is something you can realize for yourself and understand deeply about reality is that it's all it is just dreams, basically. Like there's we like to think that our dreams at night aren't real, but the ones that we're having right now in physical reality, it's real. But essentially, you could look at reality in the waking state as just another dream.
I want to go back to the lucid dreaming, astral projection realm and ask if in this book you have about 5 pages left, right? So you've pretty much scoured the whole book.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna read it again too.
Does he go into how or if this relates to death?
Yeah, he does. He definitely talks about it. See, that's the thing. I'm definitely gonna read this book again, but he says that they are definitely intertwined, and he even says that like that's what I was saying. I mentioned before about like in the astral plane talking to dead relatives and stuff. Like essentially, like parts of what he talks about is these other dimensions, eh, like deceased souls, like exist in these dimensions, like higher and lower ones. I don't know too much to speak deeply on that, but essentially, yes, he thinks that they're very intimately linked. Like all this stuff is linked, of course, you know. But yeah, he says like a lot of people will say like the astral realm, like they'll do the same thing like by discrediting it like as a dream and that it's not real, quote unquote. But his perspective on it is that it is real and like he uh he told one story where he astral projected, like, it was during the day, and he was, like, up in his room laying there or whatever, and his sister and friend were downstairs on the couch, and he had an out-of-body experience in his house where he came out of his body and, walked down the stairs and saw, uh, his sister and her friend sitting on the couch, and he made a point to look at the friend, and she was eating something, I forget what it was exactly, but it had, like, a blue package or something. He wanted to verify if it was real, quote unquote. So like when he came back into his body, he got up in his physical body and walked downstairs, looked downstairs and saw the friend and his sister sitting there just as he did in his out of body experience. And the friend had the same snack, same color package. He saw the same thing that he saw from his out of body experience. It's really interesting, like what he goes into, like the parallels, like certain out of body experiences he would have, like he would travel to like different dimensions and realms, like and then others, like, he would come out of his body and be in his house and, like, walk around, and it would just be kinda like a lucid dream, but you're in the location that you actually like, you could get up and see your body laying there, and everything is extremely vivid, and, like, you can kinda interact with, like, quote, unquote, "physical reality" or whatever you wanna call it. But, yeah, so there's, like, some debate about if it's interesting, like, the astral plane, I guess you would say, it's like it's just a different dimension, like another layer of this reality, so you can go to real places in the astral plane, and they'll be different, there'll be stuff there. It's interesting, he talks about, he was living in an apartment, and there was a stray cat that would come up to his window, like, all the time, and, like, he had, like, a relationship with this stray cat in physical reality, and when he would astral project he would see this cat and interact, but the cat was a panther, like, it was like a big black panther, and he would interact with it. He also talks about actually communicating with animals, and it's really interesting, like, the stuff he says, but he, uh, he talks about how in the astral realm, people and animals often have changes in their physical appearances, but he knew that cat, the panther was the cat, because like, he could communicate with it and, like, feel the energy. Like, you're also in these states same with lucid dreaming, you are insanely aware, like, your consciousness is literally raised, like, you can see things differently, clearly, and, like, supposedly in the astral, you can communicate with all sorts of entities, like, different aliens, I guess you could call them, like, different types of, beings, and you can communicate with, certain animals, I guess. He said he communicated with cats and birds, which is really interesting. He said it's kinda like what you might experience on psychedelics, like, there's kind of, a, um
Telepathy.
yeah, there's, like, a telepathy involved, like, there's no language barrier, so you could, like, really feel energies and, like, kinda communicate on a higher level. It's really interesting.
Sounds very similar to some of the states of mind you can get in with psychedelics and with breath work.
Right, and yeah, and that's a huge thing in this book too, is breath work. Like, it's a huge part of getting to these states too, like, while you're laying down, he mentions one exercise where, like, you, before bed, you're laying on your back and you envision, well, first you gotta get your breath work in, so you breathe in into your belly, like a deep breath, hold it maybe I think for, like, 3 seconds and then release, and, like, you can imagine, like, waves crashing on a beach, and then you get into this, rhythm where you're just observing the breath. And then what he was saying, what he likes to do is he envisions like a gold light at his toes, and like you focus your awareness on your toes, and then focus your awareness up on your legs and let it gradually move up your body with the light. So you're just laying there and you're letting this golden light roll over you, and you're setting your awareness on every part of your body as it goes up, and you're just observing your breath while doing this. And then by the end, the light is at the top of your head, and then you let it kind of just encompass your whole body. And then you have like this really open awareness. And like I tried this morning, and I think I almost astral projected, but I mentioned before I kind of bitched out. I got scared and moved because it was very strange. Like a lot of people report feeling like a vibration feeling and like hearing noise. See, for me, one of the reasons I am a little bit afraid is because I'm afraid I'm going to, like, fall into a state of sleep paralysis and see demons in my room and shit, but, he mentions sleep paralysis briefly in the book. He said he didn't wanna go deep into it because it has a lot of negative connotations, but, he said if you're in a state of sleep paralysis, you should be able to come out of body in that experience if you use sheer will and are aware and understand that you can have an out of body experience. A lot of people that have sleep paralysis are not they don't necessarily do consciousness work, or they're unaware that they could even leave their body. So a lot of people with sleep paralysis are just in sheer terror, and they're not aware that, I mean, according to Gene Hart, you can actually come out of your body in one of those experiences.
So what you're saying is sleep paralysis is not necessarily like an endpoint for you if you've had sleep paralysis before. It's something that you can sort of work through and work out of. And maybe even if you do enough consciousness work, you won't end up there at all.
I mean, I guess, like I said, he barely touched on it, and he said that that wasn't by accident. But I guess, yeah, like, you can go past that. I mean, you can come out of body, and he has, like, different methods that you can try in the book. I mean, like I said earlier, I really recommend people buy this book because it's really awesome. It's not like you know, like a quick guide to, astral projection and lucid dreams. It really breaks down what's actually happening and what you need to do in your life in order to make astral projection and lucid dreaming a part of your life and part of your consciousness work. And yeah, it's a great book. I recommend people read it, especially if they're interested in this, and especially for people who don't wanna do psychedelics. If for some reason that's not in your wheelhouse and you don't wanna do them, this, in my opinion, is the next logical step in expanding your consciousness and really seeing what you're truly capable of. Because just from the limited experiences I have with lucid dreaming, it's mind-blowing. I mean, it changed my whole perspective on life even before I was doing, consciousness work. It made me realize, like, I mean, it really made me start asking the questions like, what is reality? Like, what was that I was just doing where I was like in this place that's completely real and I had unlimited power and higher awareness? Like, when it first happened to me, I was like 18. That was like my first time, I think, or maybe 19. And I wasn't doing any spiritual work at all. It just happened to happen one night, and it was like a life-changing event for me because it really started to make me question things a little more deeper and realize that there's more to reality than just the physicalist, materialist paradigm that we're kind of indoctrinated into. I was like, "Well, that can't happen. That's like it shouldn't have been possible." Like, I've had lucid dreams where I literally have superpowers, like, it's insane, like, you could have incredible superpowers, and it's as real as what we're talking, like, back and forth right now. It's just things that shouldn't be possible, but, it's completely real, and now I'm discovering that you can really do some serious work in these states, so now that's my next step. Because I mean, I love psychedelics, but we talked about this, we're taking a little break from psychedelics for a moment until they call us again, and then we'll go back, but in the meantime, this is my priority right now.
Yeah, the call has to be there. And with psychedelics, you know, a lot of times less is more. And I remember when I first started getting into the theory of psychedelics, I heard Terrence McKenna like just glorify these things as like, you know, they're everything. They can change the world, they're your doorway to God, all this stuff. But then he said, if I do it 3 or 4 times a year, I feel like I'm hitting it hard. And I was like, what? You know? And even when I first started, there were times where it was like once a week for a few weeks. And now after all of that, I understand what he meant because less is more. And the more time you have in between experiences to integrate, that's everything. It's more important than the experience itself a lot of times because, we always, whether we're astral projecting or whether we're doing psychedelics or meditating or anything like that, that produces a non ordinary state, ultimately, we always come back here. So if whatever non ordinary state you're traveling to doesn't inform the default state, which is this, then what's the point, you know? And at a certain point in time, you can get stuck in the map or stuck in the method. And there were times where I felt I was stuck in the method of psychedelics. And it's very important to understand that there are so many methods to getting to this place. When people ask me if I would recommend doing psychedelics, I never suggest it. What I will always say to somebody who asks me, like, do you recommend doing psychedelics? I was like, should I do them? Should I do mushrooms? Which one should I do? I always say I do not recommend you do any psychedelics. What I do recommend you do is do as much research as possible into psychedelics, because what that will do is it'll open your mind up to what's possible out there in terms of all methods. And if after you do all the research, you realize, yes, this is something that I want to do. I want to do psychedelics, then that is your choice. But you can find within the research of psychedelics, you can find an infinite amount of methods, whether it be yoga. And by yoga, I do not mean stretching your body around in certain positions in, sunny California and,
Yeah, that
paying your instructors $90 a session. What I mean by yoga is real yoga. Like real yoga is way different. And we should have an episode on this too. But
sure.
whether it be yoga, whether it be meditation, psychedelics, you can find any number of methods by doing the research on them. And that way you can find your path. Because I do think that it's super important to at least start down this path at some point in your life. It just seems to be the way to go.
Yeah. It's tough though because most people listening and most people in general are so steeped in, like I keep saying, the physicalist materialist paradigm. So reading about psychedelics, a lot of people, it won't hit them, the reality of it. I mean, think about it. Think about all the research you did. I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and I think that's absolutely true. But I'm just trying to look at it like the truth of it. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who has the mindset that maybe we used to have. And like, think it back to yourself, like, when you were doing the research, you're very open-minded, so that was good, but none of it compared to when you actually tried it. When you did it, that really, blew the doors off and really made you understand how much we don't know.
Now, I agree with what you said, but the only thing that I will do is I'll say, I don't think it's right to put a hierarchy in place where I'm better than I was then, or like somebody who's doing psychedelics is better or is in a better place than somebody who isn't. To me, it's like it's all of these paths are like whatever portion of the path you're on is perfect, and it's exactly where you belong. You have to start from where you're at. And there are people out there who are so much farther down this path than I can fathom. Like the same exact path that I find myself on, there are people down in sections of that path that I don't even know exist. And that's okay. I'm starting where I'm at, and I am where I'm at, and everybody is on their path.
Well, I just wanna clarify, I wasn't saying that anything is better, I'm not placing a hierarchy on it. I'm
Mhm.
just saying that you did the research, but that didn't compare it takes. And like I said, you don't have to do psychedelics to do this. You could do, lucid dreaming, astral projection, meditation, yoga, all this stuff. But my point is, a lot of people maybe just are going to be harder to convince. But my point was, after you did psychedelics, there's no denying. Like it really just, not that it made anything better, but it made you like you were forced to realize the non-physical aspect of reality, or what, maybe what we're capable of. If you're skeptical, um like, I agree with what you said. I wouldn't recommend just diving into psychedelics, but definitely research them. But you can achieve. See, and this is the thing, I got too engulfed in kind of the psychedelics, and I kind of was in disbelief of the fact that you can have these crazy experiences without it. I was like, "Oh, you need psychedelics to understand." That's how I felt for a short period of time. But the fact is, you, just as you are purely capable of all of having these divine experiences, and you have to be, because it is you. Like, you're not you are the universe. You're part of it. Like, there's no separation there. So you have to have the capabilities. And it's for every, even if you doubt yourself, that's just your ego mind, you know, it's your ego mind just telling you lies, basically.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, of course, when you start to research a method, because even when you look at a method, the map of the method is not the territory of the method. So
Exactly.
you do have to actually participate in the method. Like when I was a big giant boxing fan, okay, there's a very big difference between understanding the theory of boxing and understanding the science of it and loving it and having a passion for it But then when you do it, then you understand really what it's about, what it means to be across from somebody who's trying to really hurt you, and you have to defend yourself and hurt them too. It's a different, very different thing to understand that. And when I got into the ring for the first time, that was very apparent. Even getting into to a ring to spar with somebody, with somebody that you've been training with, and then you see that person in the ring and they got this look in their eyes like they're gonna kill you, and you're like, oh shit, this is real now.
That's a yeah, it's a great comparison, and I think one of the reasons why it's a great comparison, like, is the fear aspect. Like, with psychedelics, with, just consciousness work, even with, like, astral projecting, out of body experiences, lucid dreaming, that stuff. Fear is one of the biggest obstacles you're gonna have to overcome. Like, you really have to throw yourself into the jungle here because your ego is going to it's playing tricks on you. It's going to push you away, but you really have to just take a leap of faith, really, and have an open mind and face the fear head on. And that's where you get the real juice. That's where you get the good stuff. When like forget who was saying. I think it was might have been Duncan Trussell. I don't know, but he was talking about one of his experiences on psychedelics, and he seen a UFO and it wanted to take him and he was too scared so he didn't go, and like looking back he's like, oh, my fear, I should have just went in, like I never had that experience afterward. Like, so the point is to face the fear and just go with it, don't fight it. So you could that's why I thought it was kind of a good comparison with boxing because it's the same thing. It's a lot of overcoming fear.
Surrender is a big aspect of all things that are humbling and that are fulfilling in life.
Yeah, yeah, that's key. Hopefully, I'm gonna try to get a hold of Gene Hart and get him on here, and he could really tell you guys about astral projection. Me, I just went through this book. I'm still 5 pages left. I'm gonna reread it honestly because it was that good. I recommend it to everybody. It's Gene Hart, Beyond Dreaming: A Guide to Awakening Consciousness Through the Path of Astral Projection and Out of Body Experiences. So yeah, definitely read that book, guys. And this is something I recommend everybody do, especially those who aren't doing psychedelics, because you can have insane life-changing experiences just as you are. You don't need any chemical, you don't need anything else, just yourself.